Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Martyn Lewis, who is the author of How Customers Buy and Why They Don't, Mapping and Managing the Buying Journey DNA. Welcome to the program, Martyn.
Well, thank you, Mike, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm really excited about this because I love this topic, and I think that it really is at the core of anything anyone does in marketing or sales, which is learning some of the psychological reasons why people buy, some of the literal reasons why people don't. So just give us a little bit of background on yourself. I understand that you've not been in the business very long, just about 40 years or so. So give us a little bit of background and then what led you to write this book.
That's exactly right, Mike, and I'm still learning. 40 years.
Yep.
So it was 40 years ago when I started as a frontline sales guy and worked my way through sales management into marketing management. I ended up VP sales and then CEO with 700 salespeople working for me. And all through that career, I was kind of very much focused on the customer and how we can improve selling. And then I decided to create my own company, Market Partners, 20 years ago. And that allowed me to work with even more sales forces. And the epiphany for me came about when I saw salespeople selling what I thought were really good products that could really benefit the customer. And maybe we could have trained the salespeople a little bit more and changed the marketing a little bit, but it wasn't off topic. It was okay. It was good. It was in some cases great. And yet customers weren't buying. So we had this idea to actually go and talk to our customers' customers about how they're buying and why they may not be buying. So we looked behind the curtain, as it was. So we were working with various companies, and then we started to talk to their customers about how they were buying. And that led to the epiphany of you've really got to understand how customers buy and specifically why they don't. Because these companies were taking great products to marketplace, and yet the customers weren't buying. So kind of that's my background, and that's what kind of led me to this work.
And then probably through that research, you probably started noticing patterns and trends. Maybe even you weren't picking up on it at first, but you started going, well, we noticed this, let's do this in response to that. And then all of a sudden, it probably started coming to life like, good night. We've got this happening so frequently, or this didn't happen so frequently. How can we notice some of these patterns and then kind of get ahead of that, curve, as it were?
Mike, you're exactly right. I don't know if you've read the book or you're just a marketing person like I am.
I'm looking forward to reading it. But just kind of what I was thinking.
You're exactly right. In fact, we didn't realize what we had to start with because we were working on very client-specific projects. And then suddenly you go, we've talked to well over 1,000, and now it's at well over 2,500 buyers about how they buy. And there are patterns, and you're exactly right. What you said is the exact conversations we were having here, that we're seeing these patterns emerge. And so why don't we take these filters and start to look at everything through that, which is what we call the buying journey DNA.
Nice.
And a couple of the real epiphanies, a couple of the patterns that we saw emerge was first, customers don't buy logically, or what you would think would be logical. And this was the big one for me, that you can take a product out to the marketplace, the customer or the prospect understands it, and they believe in the value it will deliver to their organization. So therefore, they understand they're being offered $20 for an investment of $8.
Yeah.
Now that would lead most people to say, well, only a fool wouldn't buy it.
Yep.
And what we saw is that the market is full of fools, that people are not buying. They do understand the product. They do understand your offering, and they do believe in the value it'll bring to the organization, but they don't buy. Now that to me was like, wow. Because all of sales and marketing is based on this philosophy that if you could position your product and show the value it will deliver to an organization, then surely they will buy.
Yeah.
Well, that's the fallacy. They don't, because of many reasons. But one, of course, they've got many other things to do.
Yeah.
You're not the only game in town.
And at some point, is there an element of that where they might logically know what they need? They might logically realize what your product does, and it is a pretty good product and service, and I get that, but maybe there's not enough momentum or need. Maybe that motivation or desire isn't there. Like, my house is burning down, I need to put it out. Maybe there's that motivation that needs to be stimulated there. Is that part of what you guys found?
Absolutely. And that was an unfortunate metaphor, speaking as somebody whose house did burn down. But and so, yes, I would be highly motivated to do whatever I needed to do.
Or my arm is bleeding, I need a Band-Aid. Yeah, you're exactly right. But
yeah,
okay, so here's the question.
You're exactly right.
How do you then recognize, as the marketer, salesperson, how do you recognize, here's my audience, I know from research what they need, and I know what my product does, and I know how to explain it. How do you light a match under them to go run to my product so that they realize not only they need it, but I need it now?
Mike, another great question. The first thing is we have to shift the paradigm. We have to shift the thinking that when a customer understands my offering and sees the value in it, I'm almost there. Yeah. All we got to do is dot a few more I's, cross a few T's, and I get the order. We've got to shift that paradigm to saying that's the starting point, which is really a shift. That when the customer gets your offering and they see the value in it, that's the starting point of the real buying journey. When we talk to customers about how they buy, they usually start at that point. Now, not to say that things shouldn't be focused on before that, of how do you get to that point, but that really is when the hard work begins in the buying journey. Because, as you're right, they require a lot of momentum, energy, commitment to push that through the organization. The way that I believe, to answer your question, that has to be done is to truly understand what has to happen in the customer's buying journey after the point that they go, hey, this is a pretty nifty product or service, this is a pretty nifty offering we should invest in. What happens then? Who gets involved? What are the concerns? Why wouldn't they do it now? Well, you've got to look at all the things that are going to occur and hit after that point and start mitigating and resolving them.
And at that point, you've gotten there. I would submit to you that right at the first stage and the stage you mentioned right there, there's some really powerful needs for the brand, the company, the salesperson, whichever is in play there, to be viewed as that authority and expert and influence, so that they can be trusted even to take the next step. Absolutely. So what I mean is, how do you describe that this person in your target audience, or this organization in the target audience, really has this certain need? Well, maybe it is, here's a copy of our white paper, here's a copy of a book we put out, here's us mentioned in the media talking about this very need that you have. Now that opens up the door for them to take a call with you or a meeting with you. Do you find that sometimes people are having trouble making that connection because maybe there's that trust that needs to be built first?
Absolutely. And it's such an interesting point you bring up, and I'm going to shift again, that you are absolutely right. If you go in as the expert, as the authority, and you build that trust, that's great. However, the shift occurs that you shouldn't just be an authority on the offering itself. You should be an authority on how to adopt and utilize that offering.
Yeah, I like to call it being an educator and an advocate for the target audience, not talking about the widget, but talking about why the widget is needed, talking about all the reasons why that's helpful, comparing different widgets. What if you do this, what would you get? What if you don't do this, what would you get? So the whole educational aspect. And then, oh, by the way, if you'd like to have me help you with that, we are the #1 widget provider out there. So yeah, you're exactly right. It's not focused on the product. Is focused on why it is a need, and then coming at it from that educational standpoint.
And how to use it. So let's take a look at your widget, right? So the customer loves your widget. They understand it, they see the value of it, but they're going, oh my word, our organization has used this other widget for the last 30 years. Getting people to change is going to be a real problem. So the authority the credibility, the expertise you need in this situation is to help them with how are they going to change their organization? How are they going to get a person, I'm stretching the metaphor here, but how are they going to get a person to change from using the widget they always have done over the last 30 years to this new widget? There may not be a big difference, but change is a hard thing. So in the customer's mind, in the buyer's mind, they are worrying about how are they going to get people to utilize this different widget. So the expertise has got to be in helping them implement, which in this case, I pulled out of the air, is change management.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I almost wonder what you said right there brings me up with an interesting thing. Change management is a phrase that a lot of people have heard in many industries. I would wonder if in this air of being an educator and an advocate for your target audience, how could you say in this example, change management in a different way that you make it your own? So maybe even this organization is positioning themselves as the premier what's another name? And I'm not saying we need to brainstorm it now, but if you come up with something else that says change management without saying the word change management, and now you even move forward to trademark that phrase or something, but now your target audience is like, well, what do you mean by that? Oh, well, you know what change management is, right? Oh, yeah, I've heard that. Well, what we do is we take it to the next level by, and then you start talking about it. So now you're almost branding the steps of your process in educating them about why they need it.
Absolutely, and you're appearing not as an expert on the widget, but as an expert on how to get that widget to be used.
Because people don't want, you've heard the old example, people don't want to buy a drill. They really want to buy a hole, and they need the drill to create the hole, you know.
Absolutely. And so we shouldn't be focusing on all the aspects and features of the drill. We should be focusing on the hole.
Yeah, and for instance, you know, if you drill a hole too fast, then it could burn the wood, and the wood could be very expensive. And if you have jagged edges, that could cause injury. Or now all of a sudden, now there's some things that you need to be considering, and people are like, well, how do I make sure I do that? Well, there's a lot of kind of drills out there, and there's some things that you can get really cheaply, and then that's going to cause more problems. But here's what we have found. And I think that all of a sudden now you've drawn them in to go, well, what is the best choice? So yeah, you're exactly right. And I love how you've thought through these steps. What do you think now if you have someone in a sales or marketing organization and they think, you know, I just kind of threw some advertising out and said to our sales staff, go out and sell. Where should someone start if they want to, you know, turn the ship a little bit? Because we know it's not a speedboat. We know it's like a big, huge luxury cruise liner that's going to make a 1 degree turn and a 1 degree turn. But where do you start thinking about where to start?
Another great question, because what you say is where so many organizations are, and they're doing a good job of that. And that's the traditional way of sales and marketing, but we've got a different buyer today buying in a different way. So we've got to do what I call buying process first. So forget the sales process, forget what we call the inside out, i.e. our product, our sales process, how are we going to push that into the market? Go what we call outside in. Start with the buying journey. Start with mapping the buying journey. Who are we selling to? What are they going to go through? What are their concerns going to be? Who's going to get involved? What's going to happen? Now, there's two things here. First of all, not what you imagine the customer is doing when you sell to them. That is an inside out view. You've got to really put yourself in the mind of the customer and talk through what is the customer going to do. What are the issues going to be? Who's going to get involved? What are they going to worry about? The second of the 2 points is that the other epiphany we got from our research, the other pattern, is that markets buy in a remarkably similar way. That if you go, people are going to be worrying about what kind of, I'm going to use a drill metaphor again, what kind of drill bit am I going to use to drill through 8 inches of masonry? They're going to worry about that. You've better believe that everybody else in that market is going to worry about the same things. That same kind of things are going to be on their mind, which is what we call the DNA that defines a particular market. So the starting point is to think through what is your buyer going to go through. Not to buy the drill, but to actually make the hole. So what is the buyer going to think of? What's the buyer going to be confronted with? What are they going to worry about when they look at not just buying something, but using it? Yep. So map out the buying journey. Ideally talk to customers, ideally take time on it. But, you know, we've done this in as little as a day in a room with some people, and we've mapped out a buying journey, and we've looked at what are the concerns likely to be that are going to come up. So first and foremost, map out that buying journey.
I agree with that, because it's kind of like, where do you start with research, and that is research. Makes me think of something else. Have you ever heard of or read the book ZMOT, Zero Moment of Truth?
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes.
I love that. And, in different classes I teach, I bring this in to talk about, the old school way of selling is, suspect, prospect, close and all that. But the new way is we all today, when we need something, we go and we research it first. And that zero moment of truth, I think, plays into that customer buying journey, because they are doing this before they even look at any potential providers. In fact, they might not even know that they need a hole. They might not even know they need a drill to make the hole. They might not even know they need a hole. So what are the precursors that would come up that as they're Googling around, looking around, oh, that's an interesting podcast episode on this topic, I'm going to listen to that. And then it's like, ooh, that's really a deep thought. That's interesting. I'm going to listen to this or check out that speaker's website. And then now you're drawing them in by educating them. But that zero moment of truth really brings in a whole new world, because you're educating them before you even get to the point of talking or pitching or sales meetings.
You brought up another great point here, and this is one of the huge differences with today's buying journey and today's buyers. When I was selling back in the early 80s there, if any prospect wanted to find out anything about my products, my company, even the fax number, they had to dial and talk to us. They had to dial a 1-800 number and ask for a product brochure. That was the way it worked. And we used to laugh at the sales guys who would just send out a brochure, because you would want to go out and meet with a customer. You would connect with a buyer at the start of their journey. Today, that is no longer the case. Today, the buying journey is totally disconnected from the sales process, which I think the whole notion of sales process is outdated. So you're absolutely right. The buyer is going deep into their buying journey without even talking to a potential supplier. Now, that can be bad or that can be good.
It can be
bad if you're not connected.
Yep. It's bad if you're not prepared. It's good if you are. And I think it comes full circle right back to what you said about you start off mapping the buying journey, and maybe you just add in a few extra bullet points under one of the steps, which is what questions would come to someone's mind even before they enter this quote unquote buying journey, because they might not think, I am in the buying journey, I need to do this step. They might think, doggone, my organization needs fill in the blank. And what can we do about that? Well, now, if this organization, this firm that is putting out this educational content, and it might be, we're going to write a white paper, we're going to write a series of blog posts, we're going to do a series of podcast episodes, or we're going to do a massive campaign and end it all with, we're going to publish a book on this topic, because if we want to be seen as the thought leader and get invited to keynotes, we want to be the one that drops the mic and says, we're the best-selling author of this concept. But if all of that is out there for Google to find and index, now when someone is going through that pre-buying journey, that ZMOT, they're finding some of your stuff, and probably your competitors aren't doing 1/10 of that, and you now have the leg up even before it starts.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And that goes back to those first few steps in the buying journey. What are they doing? Where are they going? And how can we influence it? Because if you connect at that level and you bring value at that level, that's going to essentially influence the way they go through their buying journey.
Exactly. So let's kind of wrap up with this final thought. We might have touched on it a little bit, but I want to make sure that we really go deep enough on the second part of your title, how customers buy, but why they don't. So what are some of the main things we need to remember about why people don't buy?
The first thing to remember is that as a supplier, you probably know this, but you trivialize it. We had a customer who was selling a really interesting thing into hospitals that would actually really help with patient care and save money, etc. But the hospital said, well, that means we have to train everybody who touches a patient in the use of this product. And we're not going to, it takes 15 minutes. We can't bring everybody off the floor. It's just too complicated. Unions would have to get involved. the person that was selling the product was going, oh, yeah, people have got to be trained, but that's really easy. So they had trivialized this buying concern of everybody being needed to be training. So they knew that it was there, but they trivialized it because they thought the value their product was bringing to a hospital was so great that this was a very, very small concern. When we talked to the buyers, this was stopping them buying. So the company actually knew that this was an issue, but they trivialized it. So that's kind of the first thing. Do not trivialize. But the things that stop people buying are exactly this kind of thing. They're living in a world where they're overwhelmed with things to do. They're overwhelmed with different priorities, changing priorities. So it goes back to, what does it take to light the fire? Is this something we really need to do? Is it something we really need to do now? Can we just go on? Status quo is the biggest killer. Can we just go on doing what we're doing? We know it's not as good, but it's good enough. There's a great killer, good enough. What we're doing today is good enough. We know it would be better, but we just don't have time for this right now. Another one that's called implications. What are the implications if I buy this widget? What does it imply? If I go with this particular service provider, what does it imply? Does it imply I have to stop a relationship with an existing provider? So what are the implications of if I buy this particular offering? What does it imply I have to do? So those are some of the many things that stop the sale. And I'll just kind of conclude that thought by saying, in today's world, we've often found that it's more important to market to the concerns, the things that stop the sale, than to market to the value you deliver to the organization. Because the prospect understands the value you deliver. They understand that very quickly. They get that. It's the buying concerns that stop things. So we've really got to try and market to that.
It reminds me of what I've learned initially from Tony Robbins, reading and listening to his stuff years ago. People are more motivated by something that would impact them negatively than, oh, this will help you do whatever. They want to run away from that fear, that pain. So that might capture their attention better than, oh, you'll increase your bottom line by this %. So yeah, that's a super good point. Well, I think we could probably continue on for about 3.5 more hours. So let's go ahead and wrap it up here with, what is the best way people can purchase your book? I literally purchased it while we were talking here on Amazon because I want to read that on my Kindle after we're done, because I just love what you're doing and talking about. But how can people purchase a copy of it, and tell them the best way to reach out and connect with you?
Thank you, Mike. Well, obviously the book is called How Customers Buy and Why They Don't. It's available on Amazon and many other outlets and in a number of bookstores. But we have a website, buyingjourneydna.com. One word, buyingjourneydna.com. That tells you about the book. It will direct you to where you can buy the book, and it will also, on the Contact Us, you can get hold of me, and I welcome all comments and thoughts and questions. It's my life, and I love connecting with people.
Well, Martyn, thank you so much for your time today. It was great talking with you and getting to know you.
Mike, thank you.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.